So welcome everybody to this workshop on health and well-being in a data and AI-driven context, with a focus on legal challenges and opportunities as Europeans to move things forward. I'll start to introduce myself. I am Sébastien Perard, so a digital librarian at the University of Bordeaux, and I will be your man orchestra for today. My colleague Charlotte Cousin will be the timekeeper. So before we start, some technical stuff. You are attending a Zoom webinar, which you might not be familiar with it, as it is slightly different from a Zoom traditional conference. So the basic differences are displayed in this slide. Basically, all your microphones as participants are turned off, and only the coordinators can turn it on. To exchange with us, you have two options. You have two options in the times where there will be exchanges. So first, you can use the regular chat button. Here, you can discuss with everybody, and you can use the Q&A button. With this button, you can raise questions that the speakers and organizers will see and raise, and that we can raise to the speakers in the Q&A time slots. The speakers can also exchange with the participants in written fashion directly through this channel. So don't hesitate to use it if you have questions to the speakers. It will be used for it will be used during the Q&A time slots. During the Q&A time slots, you can also raise your hand if you have a question. If the times allows us to do so, we can turn on your microphone then, so you can ask your question directly in oral fashion. And of course, if we have too many questions, we will have to choose. Hope you will forgive us for that. In any case, I will be the only person to blame for that, so bear with me. We will now have an introduction by Margaretha Andersson. Margaretha Andersson is an associate professor in chemistry and has an academic career in materials science and engineering. She has a broad experience in research infrastructure as user, manager, policymaker, and in governance, including industrial liaisons at local, national, and international levels. She's currently director of the Uppsala University Culture and Heritage Core Facility and leader of Work Package 3 of the ENLIGHT Alliance European project, shared digital research infrastructures, and responsible DA AI index projects underway. Thanks, Margaretha, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and welcome all people in the audience. I would just like to give a short introduction about the context of ENLIGHT and how we are working to benchmarking and optimize in order to foster more collaboration and successful innovations. Next slide, please. The European Commission is, of course, very keen on opening up for more collaboration between universities and also create impact and new technical opportunities in Europe. The ENLIGHT Alliance is a university-oriented alliance with 9, or actually now 10 universities from as many countries in Europe. And myself, I'm from Uppsala University in Sweden. The program today contains speakers from different countries and universities, but also from startup companies and so on. The ENLIGHT context is also focusing in certain areas of great importance to society. We have 6 flagship or focus areas within the ENLIGHT platform: health and well-being, digitalization, climate change, energy and circular economy, equity, and culture and creativity. And this event today is focusing on the two on the top of this list: health and well-being and digitalization. Please, next slide. We are in this undertaking, we are part of a task that is preparing for more collaboration and support between companies, societal organizations, universities, students, and so on. And within this alliance, we have more than 300,000 students. There are more than 57,000 people employed. There are a lot of joint publications every year, about 9,000, and also about 200 joint EU projects in operation. And what we are aiming at providing is, for instance, open science incentives and starter kits, connecting with digital research infrastructure, collaboration with civil society and mentoring, and early career development instruments for young researchers. We are also working at this early stage of the alliance on how to remove obstacles, how to understand each other, and how to gain experience in collaboration related to rather complex projects involving education, research, innovation, and also with focus on impact, because that's in a way something that we are all aiming at. Next slide, please. This important area today is focusing on digital means and artificial intelligence, and it has, of course, the potential to significantly improve health and healthcare and well-being, but also to foster innovation in a rather long list of important areas: diagnosis and prevention, personalized treatment plans and support for decision-making. We have digital imaging, drug discovery and development, remote medicine, language processing for medical records, patient engagement, and also administrative improvements. Of course, we can see that there are a lot of possibilities to benefit or make improvements and create impact and so on. And in a lot of these areas, it's of course also an opportunity for startups and new companies coming up from the academic arena. Please, next slide. But while AI has immense potential in healthcare, its implementation also must be guided by ethical considerations, privacy regulations, and a strong focus on patient safety. There are, as we already touched, a lot of obstacles, and they may be related to regulatory issues and compliance, to quality and accessibility of data, and also to more soft things like the resistance to change, but also more hard stuff like regulations around clinical validation and whether legislation is very hard on the real world evidence. So for a small startup in a rather new digital arena, there are a lot of things to actually take care of before you are on the market. And this is the focus for today's seminar. So by this, I will hand over to our keynote speaker, Professor Íñigo de Miguel Berrián, who comes from University of Basque Country, and he will speak about digital health, the future of medicine, perspectives, promises, risks, ethical and societal aspects. Welcome.
So just to introduce a bit, Íñigo, Íñigo works at the University of Basque Country. He has a bachelor in economy, a PhD in law, and a PhD in philosophy. Over the last 10 years, his research has focused on issues related to ethics and law in the biomedical and public health fields, and data protection and AI ethical and legal issues. He has published more than 50 articles and book chapters in journals of great impact. He has also participated in more than 20 national and international research projects, leading an H2020 project, Panel Fit, related to data protection issues. In the last years, he was deputy coordinator in the Panel Fit project devoted to data protection issues, and he has participated as an invited speaker in more than 100 congresses, conferences, and workshops. He is a member of the Spanish Bioethics Committee, and he also advises the EU Parliament through the STOA panel. So, Inigo, we are delighted to have you aboard, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. I thank you so much to ENLIGHT for inviting me, being here with you today. It's it's my great pleasure, and I will really try to do my best in order to talk about this wide topic that I will have to deal with, and I will try to do it in time, just in order to let everyone express the opinions and views after me. So I would just go straight to the point. I think that you're able to see my screen right now. So let's start by the very beginning. So as Margarita was already saying, there are lots of different challenges and also opportunities that come from the digital health. And I think that she has already mentioned some of them. We always have to consider that there's a pretty nice part of this all. There's a bright side of the moon. There are some perils on that. I will not repeat them because she has already mentioned them. And, that's quite an open list that we could think about a lot of very promising things. But there are also some perils, some kind of issues that really we will have to deal with. I would not even call them exactly issues in sense of terrible things, but just we just need to consider what might happen, what could be the real problems that we should face if we are just facing this kind of application of artificial intelligence or a data health devices and so on in the next future. And this will be issues that have to do with privacy, with the way in which we understand science as such. That will be very interesting in order to see how healthcare professionals react to these new technologies. There will be issues regarding the treatment selection and so on, about diagnosis and about apps, for example, serving as survey system or apps serving as type of the devices, just gathering data constantly. So I will just try to focus on this, and I will try to make my strongest points, the most important things that I think that we have to keep in mind if we want to really let these digital technologies land in the smoothest way in our societies. And first of all, we have the typical thing that we all know. If we want these technologies to be real, especially in the artificial intelligence, we will need the use of a lot of data. Nobody really knows what's the real amount, but we know that we will need a large amount of data. So the main problem is that, as you all know, we have a lot of issues, legal issues regarding the use of this data, and we have lots of regulations coming. We have the GDPR, and but now there are some other regulations that have already been approved, such as the Digital Market Service, the Data Governance Act, I think, is already been approved, and we have the Data Act coming, and we have also the regulation for the European health data space that will be quite revolutionary, as it seems. And also we have the AI regulation, the AI Act, that is about to be approved also. So lots of regulations. But I think that there's a wider issue on this all that is not really related to the regulation that we have, but with the mindset that we got about this issue of privacy and data sharing and so on. The idea is that in general, we all understand that data are very valuable and they could serve for social purposes, and we could all benefit from sharing data. But even though there are a lot of obstacles against that, and some of that I think that have to do with a kind of mindset that comes from the area of biomedical research. So it's not coming from the data protection area as such, but it's coming from biomedical. And this is especially related, I guess, to the terrible issues that we had in the past, not only about the Second World War, but even afterwards, as we all know. And I guess that most of you know that there are some declarations and conventions, such as the Declaration of Helsinki and the Oviedo Convention, that usually state that the interest of the human being shall prevail over the sole interest of society or science. And I think this could make sense in terms of biomedical research. Well, to be sincere, I think it makes sense when we talk about the health or the well-being or welfare of the people. But I'm not so sure on why we should always make individual interests prevail over the interests of society as a whole, if this causes not harm to the individual. And I think that we somehow need to think again about this all. I think that in the future we should focus on the idea that social interest is very important, and it should be the other way around, that in general, individual interest should serve to social interest whenever this causes no harm to the individual. So maybe we should change the focus. Of course, I'm a little bit too radical in this because this is almost kind of conscription system, but I think that at least we should turn it into a kind of opt-out system in terms of using data for research purposes, as the European Health Data Space is doing. So I think that this is a really relevant debate, that it's wider than an only legal debate on that. And I think that we'll have to deal with that in the next years. Oh, sorry. So, and then we have another very interesting thing that's happening and that we will have to face in the next years. Well, I think that when we will start using AI systems in healthcare practice and so on, we'll have to deal with something that is relevant. And it is that in general, we have a traditional scientific method, and that most of those who are working as healthcare professionals have been educated on this method, and they all understand more or less that science is based on the idea of explanation and prediction. And indeed, both things work, to say so, in the same way. And we consider them to be two sides of the same coin, meaning that we can only make a prediction when we have an explanation. And an explanation usually serves us to make a prediction. Well, main problem is that this does not work well when we will be starting AI systems. Sometimes it could work, sometimes it will not. And the reason is that AI systems don't really work on this basis. They don't work in a way that they just produce an hypothesis and they just try to know whether this works or not. They just make correlations constantly, and they build predictions based on this type of associations. So they don't give explanations of why they are recommending something. So sometimes we could perfectly associate an explanation to that, but sometimes it will happen that we will not be able to provide an explanation. And it may happen that in the future, healthcare professionals will have to face a quite, blow-minding situation, because they will have a traditional explanation and somehow a quite traditional perspective of what might happen with a patient. But then they will have a prediction made by the AI tool that saying something different, and they will probably have to make a decision on whether they prefer to follow what it's been, what could be explained somehow, or they would prefer to just, rely on what the system is telling them to do. And this is going to be I think, somehow very, very difficult to understand in practice. This is not happening in some other areas of knowledge, such as, for example, astrophysics, because they are quite far from the traditional scientific method and so on. But I think that in terms of a healthcare professionals, that will be hard to do. So this is quite interesting if we consider, for example, the case of recommending a treatment, because when a healthcare professional will have to deal with one of those challenges, and they will have to make a decision on whether they follow somehow the traditional way, or whether they follow their own instinct, or whether they follow what they feel that has to be done. Probably they will be aware that if they are contradicting what a AI system is recommending, that could be somehow a little bit complicated, and this could bring them some issues. Instead, if they just follow what the machine is saying, that could be easier for them in some scenarios. This is something that we will have to deal with, because there will be lots of considerations, for example, related to defensive medicine. And if somehow a healthcare professional is considering that, if in doubt, they follow what the system is proposing, there will be no major issues to them. They could be tempted to do so. Of course, I'm pretty sure that if they consider that their option is much better than the option that is being suggested by the AI tool, they will always prefer, or almost always prefer, their own option, because they will have a nice explanation. They will be sure that this is going to happen, and they will go for that. But if they are in doubt, I think that some psychological considerations will probably apply. Also will apply, for example, the cost, different costs of the treatments. And most probably in the future, insurance companies will charge or even public systems will charge the physicians that if they are opting for a treatment that is not the treatment recommended by the AI system, they will have to provide a nice explanation and so on in order to opt for that, if it is, especially if it is more costly than the one that is offered or suggested by the system. But I think that in the case of treatment, it works quite in a complicated way, because when we are recommending using AI in treatment, there are a lot of different, uncertainties that we will have to face. And sometimes, even if we don't have them, it could be very difficult from a social way of thinking to understand why this type of AI tools are being implemented. And I'm bringing you quite an example that's been exposed in the academic literature. That is the Stanford algorithm that you have heard of that. Well, anyway, I would just summarize that. The Stanford algorithm was just an algorithm that was devoted to know what will be the real, what will be the estimation of the lifetime of a patient coming to a hospital. And so what the AI tool was telling was more or less whether a complete patient will be alive in like a 1 year time. And this was designed especially in order to help healthcare givers to decide on whether they will be providing a kind of treatment devoted to cure the patient, or whether they should opt for palliative care, for example. Because we all know that, especially in some cases, we overuse our means. Sometimes we overtreat the patient, so that's something that should be avoided, and this could be helpful. Yes, but imagine what, from a social perspective, would be the impact of using this kind of algorithms. I'm quite sure that lots of patients will feel really that this could be used against them, and they would probably not understand the logic. So there could be some conspiracy theories saying that, in fact, what they are trying to do is to save money, and instead of treating people and so on, they are just letting them die or something like that. So it's something that I think that we have to keep in mind, that even if we had some tools that could serve quite well, it will not be so easy to justify them from a social point of view, and we will need a lot of work on that. Then we have something that comes from the corner of the diagnosis and the use of artificial intelligence in diagnosis that seems to be less problematic, because in diagnosis, there's evidence that already exists, and physicians more or less could take a look to the evidence. And but it's in practice, we know that the use of AI tools could really change the way in which physicians arrive into some kind of diagnosis in practice. For example, we know that it might happen that they don't arrive to the same conclusions if they know in advance what are the recommendations made by a system, or whether they not. So they are influenced somehow by the recommendations provided by the AI tool. And moreover, we are just realizing that it might happen that this does not only happen when we are receiving this kind of advice, but also happens that if they are in some other cases where they don't really have access to this kind of advice, quite curiously, they follow what's been learned in their interaction with the AI tools, meaning that those tools are somehow educating or somehow influencing the way in which those physicians are learning. Because we all know that physicians, they are trying, but they learn all over the professional lives. This is essential indeed for good practice. But we are starting to consider that the use of AI may interfere or somehow influence the way in which they learn. And this could be worrying if it really happens that the AI system contain biases, because we all know that biases are some of the most difficult issues to face in terms of AI tools. So one of the best ways to know that, or to discover this kind of biases in practice, is that physicians are just telling us that the AI tools are not working well. But the main problem is that they don't really appreciate that, but they are usually inferiorizing this kind of biases. We are not really fighting against the issue, but we are just, widening that and making it a bigger issue instead. And this is really, this could have consequences in the future, because most probably we will only be aware of this kind of biases when the effects are really, terrible enough to be noticed. So this is something that we really have to consider, and I'm not so sure about whether the AI regulation is really will be useful in order to face such situations in the way it's being designed right now. And I will just go quite fast with the last part, just in order to get this in time. Well, we also have this app, this health data, and all the type of of different activities that could be linked to the use of personal data with apps. So we are now in a situation where there are many apps entering the market, and they collect a lot of data that could be used for medical related purposes. We all know that not all those apps will be considered as medical devices. Only those ones who are directly linked to medical purposes will be considered as such, individual medical purposes indeed. But it's quite curious that there will be lots of different apps that will be gathering personal data that could be used for medical purposes, but will not be considered as a medical devices. So main problem is that we don't have, or I don't think that we have a clear way to deal with all of that. And I think that in general, we will have to rely on the GDPR at this moment. But there are some things that come from outside the GDPR and have to do with some other regulations. And this has to do, for example, with pre-formulated standard contracts, because in this case, I think that that will have to do with consume and so on, and there will be different regulations, but it will be hard to notice in advance how we are going to deal with that. And this is especially worrying, in my opinion. We are talking about the apps that have to do with surveillance or could be used for these purposes. And yeah, I know that most of you will probably think about those apps that could be used in terms of public health and so on. And this is true. We all know that this could be used, and in times of the COVID, they were used in terms of tracking, especially in some countries. And there were lots of differences in between countries, depending on the perspective about the respect that people's rights deserve. We'll know that, but I would like to focus on a different thing. That is the use of this kind of apps for what we could call individual surveillance or something like that. And I will make you an example of one of those kind of apps and devices and so on. Maybe some of you know about that, but on 30 November 2017, there was a pharmaceutical, Otsuka, and a silicon company that was called Proteus that obtained a kind of approval by the FDA to use a digital medicine system called Abilify My Sight. That was really a tablet with a sensor. And to try to describe that in a simple way, this was a drug device combination product comprised of a tablet embedded with an ingestible event marker sensor. So this was a kind of drug that is used as an antipsychotic for adults suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder. So it worked in a quite simple way. The patient swallowed the pill, and there was a kind of a sensor that was releasing an electric signal to a patch in the patient's torso when the pill reached the stomach. So this patch just collected the information about something like whether the pill was already been taken and some other medical information and so on. And this was sent both to the patient, but it was also available to the physician that was taking care of this patient. So somehow it seems to be quite an interesting thing, because in this way physicians could have a lot of data about adherence of the patient, and so they could be an excellent tool indeed to know about whether the patients are really taking their pills. And this could, I guess that lots of physicians really dream about knowing whether the patient is really following their instructions, or whether some of the issues that they have to do with with some problem with the adherence to the treatment. And this could be particularly important, of course, with people with mental illnesses, because this has also to do with public health and so on. So the main problem that we have is that seems quite promising, and this could be useful in the future, but we have a lot of issues related to privacy in those cases, because there will be lots of data there that will be shared. There will be also issues related to the misuse of medicines, because sometimes some pharma companies will link some concrete drugs to the sensors in order to come back with patents that are almost lost, or with some ancient drugs that are not working as well as the new ones do. And they're also related to the relationship of trust between patients and doctors. So those are some challenges that we will have to face now. And of course, and I'm just finishing with this, we all know that at this moment, there are some physicians that are even recommending their patients to use some types of apps that have not been officially approved as such, but somehow those or some physicians are recommending that, are telling the patients to gather data from these apps, and these are being somehow used and incorporated to the records of the patients. And this is really a kind of a very worrying thing, because I don't think that our legal framework really allows for that in this moment, but it's being used in practice. And most probably this will be a nice path to use in the future, but we'll really have to understand how this might change things as such. And I think that I will end up here. I think that more or less I managed to finish at the scheduled time. I hope that I didn't go too fast. And of course, you can make all the questions that you would like to, and I will try to answer them in the traditional way or in the question and answer section. So thank you so much, Sebastian. And I will remain here at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inigo, for this wide introduction about a lot these various complex society problems that are technological, the technological improvements of the last years ask about this sensitive question of digital health. So so just for the audience, we will have now 3 different speeches, and after those 3 speeches, you can we can have a dedicated time for the Q&R for the talk of Inigo and the 3 following speeches. So bear with us. Thanks a lot for this enlightening talk, Inigo, and then I'll move to the next speech. Thanks again. Next speech will be will raise the specific issues that Inigo started to address in the keynote, which is the issue of privacy issues. So this will be this talk will be done by Jeanne Mifsud Bonici. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Jeanne. Great. Terrific. So I'll just introduce you with a few words, hoping it's okay with you. So Professor Jeanne Mifsud Bonici first studied law at the University of Malta, where she received a Doctor of Laws degree with a thesis on data protection issues in the medical sector. As a Chevening scholar, she read for a master's in cognitive science at the University of Birmingham, UK. After some years of teaching and legal practice, she read for a Doctor of Law degree at the University of Groningen, researching on self-regulation in the cyberspace. She was awarded a Rosalind Franklin Fellowship at the University of Groningen in 2009. Since 2015, she has been appointed as a full professor at the same university and holds where she holds the chair in European Technology Law and Human Rights at the Department of European and Economic Law at the Faculty of Law of the University of Groningen. And since 2010, she co-leads the STEP research group at Groningen on e-privacy, which she also co-founded. She has taught and researched law at the University of Malta, the University of Central Lancashire, University of Amsterdam, and currently at the Faculty of Law, University of Groningen. Her current research focuses on 4 main themes: privacy and security, data protection and health-related data, internet governance, and converging technologies and convergence of law. We are thrilled to have you on board, Jeanne. Now I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you for this very extensive introduction. Thank you very much. I feel very welcome. And I'm very, very pleased to be the first speaker in the second set of presentations, but also to follow after this keynote speech, because I think I agree with all the issues raised, and this doesn't happen often that you immediately agree with all the issues that are raised. And I hope that my presentation will be not too repetitive, because there's a lot of agreement that you will see as we go along. I would like to start off by saying that I have 3 assumptions in this. And my 3 assumptions are that this digital innovation, and especially the use of data in this digital innovation and artificial intelligence, can improve health and well-being. You say, come on, it's a given. It's not a given, but I'm also taking it as an assumption. My second assumption is that I consider that in this concept of health and well-being, enjoying legal rights is essential. So what we have managed to create until now in our legal frameworks and in the rights that we have created, we do not want to compromise with them, I would say, because we have digital innovation and artificial intelligence. And now I'll come back to this as we go along. So our core fundamental rights, we do not want to compromise, and that's why privacy keeps on coming across as one of our challenges in this area. My third assumption is that protection of confidentiality, where we actually first started, right? This basis of trust for all health and well-being is still at the core. And it is this notion of trust, I think, which is probably at the being challenged most with this digital innovation and artificial intelligence. So I'm starting with these assumptions that I take that for me are my starting points to think of, okay, so where are we in this context? And I see 3 shifts going on. That law is trying to adapt to the new developments, right? In the introduction, Margareta introduced so many innovations that are going on in the medical, in the health and well-being field. And for these innovations to flourish and for society to be able to benefit well, and for us as citizens to feel that we can both get the benefit but still be protected, law needs to adapt, and law is adapting to the new developments. But law can be also quite strict and not so flexible. So we are also seeing that technology is coming up with solutions to work with law. And for this, I will later in a few coming slides, I will discuss an example that we're discussing in one of the projects we're involved in on the use of synthetic data in the training of AI models. And there you could see that one of the incentives there is also to see whether we can overcome some of the perhaps perceived rigidity of the law. But we also see that there's a shift, also another shift in the developments that are going on, that we have many new legal frameworks being developed, but also there's an opportunity to develop new frameworks that can work with the law and with the legal developments. I know that at this point, these all seem to be a little bit vague, but I will try to give examples as I go along in the next slides. Our point of departure has been the General Data Protection Regulation, right? It has set the ground rules. Of course, it doesn't come from nowhere. As we know, the General Data Protection Regulation has built on now almost 50 years of data protection regulatory frameworks from the first developments in the Council of Europe. And what I like to always remember and allow me to also remind all of us on this is that the whole notion of data protection that now has sort of become part of all our lives actually started from the medical field, or rather the incentive to start regulating this was in the medical area. So we go back to the history of how the first international convention on data protection started in the 1980s. The first working party on this was actually to provide rules on how to protect data in the medical context. It was at the time really the medical, okay, now with so in the health domain, that was felt that the use of data, especially in digital form at the time, this I'm speaking now at the late 70s of the last century, right? Where the discussions were going on now that we will have more computerization in our hospitals, in our medical practices, how do we still protect and make sure that this notion of confidentiality we had before is still there, even though we have more parties used? We've moved a long way since then. But I would like to, why do I bring this up as a reminder, is that sometimes in our discussions, we keep on saying the rigidity of data protection in not allowing us to always use all the data that we would like to use, whether in research, whether in the building of new models in practice in our medical in our healthcare institutions and devices that we are building. And so we claim that data protection is our limitation, but I'd like us to keep in mind that actually data protection developed in this context of the medical field, and specifically to remind us that we cannot just use everything without limitations. And I will here actually thank the previous speaker on the very good example on the apps used on the use of tracking the intake of the medicine, the following of the agreed program of health, especially in, let's say, in a mental health care situation. These all, as has been discussed, bring very positive developments. And yet, do we really need every item of the data? And how are we going to really make sure that this is not misused or abused? I liked very much the reference to surveillance. Are we going to be using this actually counter to health, but to add stress by having been surveilled? In the United States, we've had, very recently, very shocking developments where in this whole area of anti-abortion rules, the enforcement of that was in trying to enforce that, the enforcement authorities sought to obtain data that is in the apps of some users when they were tracking the menstrual cycle, for example, or they were tracking, so individual persons in what felt like the privacy of their app, and this app is there to help in other well-being situations, has actually been used in the prosecution of the same people or of health clinics. So yeah, I think it is very important to keep this difficulties in mind. On the one hand, data is there to increase our health and well-being, but it is also a challenge on how to use it well. But let me come back to the theme that I was thinking about, and what the General Data Protection Regulation sets the ground rules, but as we said, they may not always be flexible enough, especially in the development of AI. And here we see the development of complementary legal frameworks with the health data spaces, the Digital Governance Act, and so forth. And yet what we're seeing is that there are difficulties in having these frameworks working together. And the legislator is having quite a difficulty in finding a good way of making health data spaces compatible with the GDPR, and yet achieving the aims of having this data that we can then use also for AI developments. And in the AI challenges, here again, we see that We have at a European level, the AI Act being developed, right? It's in the trialogue stage, so it's really in the last stages where the bigger compromises are being sought to be achieved in the law. But again, we have recurring uncertainties. How will this act? First of all, will it achieve what it is promising to achieve in making sure that the AI developments that we have are as responsible as they can be in our society? But how does this act also work with other existing regulations, like the medical devices regulation and the certification therein? Are we creating double work? And even if we are creating double work, does this result in a better protection and better safety and safe use of these developments in health and in our health and well-being? I referred to earlier on synthetic data, and I'd like to very briefly mention that we're participating in a project funded by the Dutch, co-funded by the Dutch National Scientific Organization, the NVO, for the north of the Netherlands with the University Hospital, exploring the legal and ethical and social aspects of AI developments in health. And there are 4 use cases that we're looking at, but I want to just concentrate very briefly, because I know that I've just overstepped my time, or almost, on synthetic data. Synthetic data has been developed in, oh, apologies that I have been playing with the screen. In synthetic data, as you are aware, right, this is the creation of data from originally what I would call real data, but data that you can use its characteristics to train then an AI algorithm. And this in literature has been flagged as this is a way of how to go around data protection, because this can be anonymous. This data can be anonymous. In this project, in this ELSA North Netherlands project, we're trying to see, is this the case? And if so, how do we use synthetic data in the health and well-being sector? And for this, we're working with an AI data protection impact assessment methodology, which is allowing us to discuss with our colleagues from the technical development on the various steps in the development and how the data is being created, how it's being used in the AI. And what we've come across as a very preliminary findings is that the ethical frameworks on using this data are still in development. We're still also discovering that. There may be misunderstandings on what actually the synthetic data is doing in line with the law. Is it really a way on how we can avoid or do away with some of the difficulties of the GDPR? But we also see that some of the inherent biases, and that's where the AI Act comes in, are still there also in synthetic data. And so what we see from this example and what we hope to be doing is that we see that there are scope for new frameworks. Formal law may not be able to solve all the issues, but it is now an opportunity for legal scholars, together with all the people involved in the development and use of data in healthcare and well-being, to develop frameworks and models of privacy protection that are in line with the law, but that fit more the developments that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeanne, for this really wide and clear focus on very complex challenges, on those legal challenges, and the fact that basically on both technological and legal sides, work is under progress. So thanks again for this really great talk about all those legal and ethical issues. And I will now move on to the next speaker. So after those privacy issues, we'll now have a presentation that is more focused on research data, technical and interoperability issues by Olivier Rouchon. So I'll just share my screen for 30 seconds. So Olivier is, I'll introduce you very quick. So after graduating as a computer science engineer and various assignments with French institutes, so Olivier Rouchon spent 7 years at Dell as an IT project manager and another 16 at the CNES, a French National Data Center for Higher Education and Research, where he held different managing positions in software development before leading the digital preservation department, with a 5-year stint as the head of the HPC department between 2013 and 2018. In 2023, he joined the Open Research Data Department at the National Center for Scientific Research, the CNRS, to work on digital computing and data infrastructures and open data. In addition to these duties, he published papers relating to the long-term preservation of digital objects, is actively involved in the French Aristote Pin working group on digital preservation as a coordinator, and sits as the Humanum, very large research infrastructure in social sciences and humanities in France, scientific committee and Contrast Seal board. So Olivier, after that, I'll leave you the floor. Delighted to have you aboard.
Thanks, Sébastien. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for this opportunity to present the work that I've been doing actually in another European-funded project, the Fair Impact. And I'll talk about legal interoperability, as you said, maybe from a technical standpoint. So just to summarize the Fair Impact project, it's an EU-funded project which started in the summer of last year, 28 partners, and we are working on basically the adoption of the fair best practices in Europe in the what we call the EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud, which can be seen as, I've heard from Jeanne and Inigo, they mentioned the health data space. The EOSC can be seen like the scientific research data space, really. So that's what we're doing in the Fair Impact project. I just remind you that FAIR is an acronym which stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reusable. That's for data sets and services for research, really. So I will not spend too much time on the description of the project because I only have 15 minutes, just to show you that we have a whole work package dedicated to interoperability. So what are the legal interoperability challenge in research? Well, the main idea of interoperability is to reuse and interoperate the data sets that have been produced by previous research programs, right? Say, for example, it could be interesting for one researcher to aggregate data sets from, I don't know, atmospheric pollution across cities in a given country, and data sets from a chronic asthma, for example. But that raises a couple of legal potential problems, which are not only bound to privacy and data protection, as it's been discussed in the previous talk. When you build a data set, you will assign a license and permission to reuse it. So you will have to describe what those constraints are in that subject. You will also have data protection and privacy that's been mentioned earlier, particularly when you manage personal or sensitive data. You have to stick to the GDPR rules. You could have also some data sharing agreements, say access rights, if your data says it's public, restricted, sensitive, as an embargo, and things like that, right? And you can also have some intellectual property rights associated with the data sets, such as copyrights, for example. Also, some end users right when it goes to combining the data sets between themselves. But that's not all. You've got many more aspects about data ownership, about the applicable laws, and the conflict resolution when there's a problem, right? So as you can see, many potential difficulties. And given that we have to reflect this information in a human readable way, but also in a machine readable way, because the AI that we mentioned earlier will open those data sets and will have to know immediately whether it can be reused or not, right? So that's the main concern at the moment. How do we describe that information in a machine readable way? So we have, at the European level and at the EOSC level particularly, we've got some potential solutions. The first one is the EOSC interoperability framework. So that's a report which was published 2 years ago, roughly, by one of the task forces that the EOSC Executive Board put together. It's the Interoperability Task Force. It sets some recommendation on 4 different domains: the legal, the organizational, but also the semantic and the technical interoperability, with that nice acronym of LOST. And particularly on the legal aspect, it analyzes some minimal metadata models and do some mappings between them. And it also provides some recommendation of a minimum metadata set, which would be useful to describe the different aspects that I mentioned before. This report was produced 2.5 years ago. There have been some follow-ups to this report. It's been evaluated by the European Commission. It's currently under revision, so we could expect a new version anytime soon. And that will be strengthened by the fact that that EOSC interoperability framework capabilities and gaps have been analyzed and will feed the new version of the document. But that should be seen as really the building block for the interoperability of research data sets in the EOSC. So the main problem of this report is that it provides recommendation. There's no technical implementation suggested, right? So you need to have a look at it and try to take the best of it and see what's relevant for your own use case. So how should that be done? It should be done through metadata, really. So what is metadata? It's data that describes your data set, right? So it goes along with your data sets and describe the different constraints that you will associate to your data set. So there are many metadata schemas that are relevant to convey legal constraints. Some of them are very simple, like the Dublin Core that all the librarians may know. The Dublin Core is something like 25 years old. It's really straightforward to implement. That's probably why there's a massive adoption of this schema. But you have some others, simple as well, like DataCite or RIOX. RIOX is really intended for, really developed in the UK, but not so much in the rest of Europe. And you've got some more complex metadata schemas, such as DKTAP, DDI, CDI, work rate, or OpenAI application profile. These ones are more recent. They are more focused on datasets, because Dublin Core and DataCite were more intended for publications. Yeah, so basically, you need to introduce some level of complexity because, as we saw, there are many aspects of legal constraints, right? For example, the Dublin Core metadata schema has just one field, which is called rights, and it's free text that you can put there. So it's a little bit too few to describe different aspects, such as a license, an access policy, privacy restrictions, and things like that. Because it's free text, it means that potentially you cannot compare what you have, the level of information provided for one dataset with another. So we need to improve that, and the best way to improve that is to use controlled vocabularies, which will be recognized by human, but by machine as well. So if you've got many different vocabularies available at the moment, many of them have been endorsed by the W3C, which is which means that they will last over time, on the long term. So some of them are for digital rights, some of them are for data privacy, some others are for provenance information. So based on that, what do we do in Fair Impact? In the task I'm coordinating, in the WP6 that I showed earlier, we have a deliverable on core metadata schema for legal interoperability. Basically, that's a 3 steps deliverable. In the current phase that we're in, we are comparing the different schemas and vocabulary that I mentioned on the slide before. We will also bring on board some use cases, which means some institutions that have implemented some of these schemas and vocabulary to depict some legal constraints. And based on that, we'll take the best of both, and we will provide recommendation and kind of framework, right? That means that we will combine schemas and vocabulary, controlled vocabulary, to enable that. In case you're interested, we have a series of workshops between November and December on the different subjects that we are dealing with in the project. And we have a session on legal and organizational interoperability that I will be sharing by early December. We plan to invite experts and panelists that will discuss their own strategy for the implementation of these schemas and vocabulary to enable legal interoperability. And I would use my last slide to talk about another EU-funded project, which is FairCore for EOS. which is supposed to develop some services that will enable the fairness of the EOSC. And among these services is a registry in which you will be able to register metadata schema and assign them persistent identifiers, but you will also be able to register some mappings between schemas. And that will be extremely useful because that will mean that one can use DKIT IP as a schema, another can use OpenAir application profile as a schema, but we will have mapping that will enable the interoperability and the interoperability of legal constraints. We will be able to map these constraints between different data sets, and that will enable the aggregation and the reuse of data sets. So that's where we are in the project, and I'm now done with my presentation. I hope I'm on time. Maybe I hope I haven't been too quick.
It's perfect, Olivier.
Okay, great.
Thanks a lot for your talk. I would say that open science has at its core has fair data, and fair data is basically as close as necessary, as open as possible. And thanks for focusing on this as open as possible question on the metadata side and European project side. Thanks a lot. Now I'll move to the next speech by Susan Bredenberg. So I'll just introduce you very quickly, Susan, and then I'll leave you the floor. We will have a concrete experience from a startup, Zelda, by her CEO, Susanne Bredenberg. Susanne Bredenberg has more than 18 years of experience with the life science industry. She has contributed to the development of several pharmaceutical products, which are now on global markets, and has co-founded and been the CEO of a pharmaceutical startup. Previously, she was business advisor at the Uppsala University Innovation, and she holds a PhD degree in pharmacy from Uppsala University and an executive MBA from Stockholm School of Economics. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you for the opportunity to talk here today. I will have a really different perspective on this topic, and I will give you a short introduction of the company and also discuss somewhat about the important steps and challenges that we have as a really small company. So Zelda is a startup. It was founded in 2018 by pathologist Erik Wilander and Søren Nygren. And Erik Wilander was associated with the Uppsala University at this time, and I will come back to what kind of support we have gotten through that association. And he identified a need for streamlining and digitalization of methods within the field of pathology. And the business idea was to advance the cancer diagnostics with the standardized image analysis softwares. So the vision of the company is to give both faster and more efficient care to be able to provide less suffering and better quality of life, both for the patients, but also for relatives, and improve the healthcare within the society. So the main problems that were identified was that within pathology, there is a large both intra and intervariability within the diagnosis. traditional techniques were used, and it was a lot of manual handling, or still is at many places. So that affected both the treatment choices and thereby also the prognosis of the outcome of the treatment. So the problem was that they should be more standardized, and standardization in both grading of the cancer progress and also of if it was cancer or not. Another problem is that the resources. There's a global shortage of pathologists, and the ones still working are getting older. And so both that the number of pathologists is decreasing, but also that we as a people are getting older, and the need for more pathologists is also increasing. And the waiting time, the long waiting time for treatment, and since the diagnosis is taking time used by these traditional techniques, and that causes, of course, suffering both for the patients and their relatives. And it's a large variation between countries in this respect. So the solution that we are trying to have in our product or our platform is that we will meet this increasing demand for digital pathology and tools to standardize and streamline the cancer diagnosis. And we have developed a patented technology platform for this automated image analysis of tissue samples. And the first product is for assisting pathologists in detecting cancer when they are reviewing images from the prostate needle biopsies. And we are still in development, and we are planning to have a product on the market in 2025. So it's still quite a long way to go. And what we have seen, and I might come back to that, is to incorporate our product or the software into integrated in well-established diagnostic applications is a way forward for us as a small startup, and also for the healthcare situation or the healthcare with digitalization. It's a really difficult for these systems. The big healthcare system is a very big step for a small company to be able to enter, and therefore we have started a collaboration with another company which is much bigger, much larger, and have this system for images archiving, and also to have this all the regulations against the healthcare with GDPR and all that kind of regulations that we take advantage of the bigger companies' possibility to have that kind of statements. So the cellless prostate, just for your understanding, is that we are, I don't know if you see my arrow, but we have the normal prostate image, which is it's stained, so we can identify if it's normal or not. So it will get different stain depending on if it's cancer or not, and the software is identifying the areas where the cancer tumor is situated, and you can also see if it's graded with kind of stage the cancer has. And so it's a decision support for the pathologist, which is setting the diagnosis. So the software is not, it's a decision support. It's not setting the diagnosis, that the pathologist as a human will do that, and not the software. But in the future that might be possible, but then coming back to the regulations again, and also the risk management of that kind of result to deliver by the software, we have decided to make this as a decision support, not as setting the diagnosis directly. So what the product is meeting the demand of, or the need for, this as a decision support. It will be improved quality by it gets a more confident result. It gets higher reproducibility for the result, which will be the support of the pathologists. We will address the resources lack and assist the pathologist, and thereby they get the support. It will get faster to set the diagnosis, and it will get faster, and thereby the time to reduce the time to required for diagnostic outcome. So thereby it will get both a more correct diagnosis, but also faster diagnosis for the patient. So back to the important steps and the challenges that we have been through and still are, since we are still in the startup phase, is important for us has been the innovation support. In Uppsala, we have a really good community of support, and one of the stepstones that we have been using is the innovation office at the university, and getting the insight into the market analysis and also the IP situation to get a patent evaluation. And this was done really early on, and being able also from ALMI, which is a support organization in Sweden, for the prototype development, and to be able to start building this product. This has been really important to get that early on. We also got some funding from IIT Health for the prototype development, and further also from the innovation office by the regulatory strategy, since there are both regulations around the product, but also around, as we have been discussing here, to access to patient data and so on. And at the moment, and since last year, we have this incubator in Uppsala named Uppsala Innovation Center, and we, by collaboration with them, we have got access to business coach, which is following the company, and also some funding for regulatory development and the communication strategy and so on. And the other challenges that we have been identified and still working with is the team. We are working with the technical development, and here we have this very fast moving technological development, and we have consultants working with this, but also to have access to clinical applications. That means that we can get into the healthcare and start using our product and start evaluating if the product development is done by the right tasks, and what kind of results do the pathologists really want and need. And here we have a challenge with the regulations, because there are standardized methods within the healthcare that are not really getting in along with the digitalization. So there are standards that are more harmonized with the way of working, with the way when we have the opportunity with the software and getting more data, these standards are not really harmonized, and there is, as I say here, in the timing, healthcare is not really ready for the digitalization as I see it, and it's also very different between areas and regions within, at least within Sweden, and this is a really challenge for coming in with new applications and new technologies, and because there is also a lack of resources, of course, within the healthcare to be able to meet this new technology. So for us, it's really important with the network that we will get through the innovation support, and also with collaborations. We need collaborations both with for the technological development, but also for the implementation into the healthcare. And as a startup, there is a really big need for financing. So we are meeting a lot of investors. And here you can also see that there is a lack of competence within the different investors, but also the timing, and to see and to understand how this new technology can be implemented, and when, because they are of course wondering about the return of investments, and are the healthcare ready for this digitalization, and when can you be on the market, and how much will pay back to them going into the market penetration discussions, because it's really good to have a new technology, but if the customer are not ready to apply them, then the timing aspect is important for them. So scaling up this technology development, combining this with the implementation into the healthcare, and get the right funding to find the right team competence, and all that is a really complex setting for a small startup, and it's really important, and it's a challenge, but it's also a lot of fun to understand all these parts. But we are still working on it, and I think that regarding both the competence and the digitalization of the healthcare, it's coming, but it's a lot about timing. And of course, it's also possible to apply for soft funding and collaboration projects, but the most challenging is that to have the timing of both that development of the technology, but also the implementation part to have this in a joint project is really challenging, because there are different timelines for different organizations. So that was some reflections from a startup. I'm happy to take questions about both the Zelda company, but also other aspects. Thank you.
Okay, if no one has a question, too bad. I'll use one of my questions. Maybe just a general remark so that other attendants can think of questions. I have the general feeling that the core of all the ethics-related side is really about trust in the end, because it's really what makes the link between what we can do and what we can do without hindering individual rights, but in an enlightened, so that people are enlightened in the GDPR sense of the word. In fact, I don't know if you want to build on that, use that as a starter to comment something. Don't hesitate.
Well, if I can have a comment on this, yeah, I think that in practice, trust is the magic word. I guess that we always have to keep in mind two ideas. One is that I guess that most of us are willing to help society work better, meaning that I don't think that most of us is just, being somehow, against research or the use of data for some purposes. Main problem is that there's some issues with the trust. So we are always, a little bit unconfident on what's going to happen with our data if those are, available. So I think that the most important thing is how to provide this trust and how to provide, for example, nice safeguards or something like that, that convince people that we are really, we are really sure that they will not suffer bad consequences for what they are doing. And this is a little bit, complicated to say, but I think that in the past we did that just overacting with the idea of consent, and we were asking for consents for everything, and consent became something like a kind of bureaucratic requirement that in practice did not really mean so much. So I guess that in the future we should turn the focus and just tell people, hey, please be confident. We will really use your data for the purposes that you agree with, and we will take care that nothing wrong is going to happen to you. And I think that this should be the real and the nice approach for the future. That's my point. But of course, it's open to discussion.
Thank you, Inigo. Olivier, you wanted to build on this?
Yes. So the interesting question is, how do you enable trust then? And that's a tricky one. I mean, in my opinion, you will enable trust by producing some frameworks and proving that you stick to that framework or good practices, right? Which potentially brings the question of certification or accreditation or things like that. That's something I can speak about because I'm a member of the board of the Core Trust Seal, which is a certification mechanisms for data repositories, right? But domain agnostic, not specific to health or things like that. So it's probably too low to be a target to enable confidence or trust in the health domain specifically. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yes, Jeanne. Thank you, Olivier.
If I can just slightly add, because we are in the same project that I was mentioning during the presentation in the Elsa North Netherlands, so in the north of the Netherlands, we're trying to, one of the work packages separate from law is trying to understand how groups or groups of people, whether they will be willing to be subject to AI diagnosis in the health sector. And this was, for us, we were looking at it from a trust, but then we say, is this a reliability? Is this a matter of acceptance? And we were also thinking of what is it that people consider with trust? And one question we're asking is, would you be ready to subject yourself, or will you, if the doctor said that this analysis has come up from an AI solution, is that good enough for you? So we're also struggling from trust from that perspective. Thank you.
It reminds me, if I may, of a discussion that was held at the RoboCop this year in Bordeaux, actually, which is why I attended, which focused really on the notion of cobotics, which is how do humans and robots, but it can be virtual ones, it could not necessarily be the ones in movies, like in movies, it can be very AI devices. How do humans and machines work together and work in an efficient, trustworthy way. So it rings a bell because I think we are kind of around the same concept here. There was just a question we can end with in the Q&R. Is EAT Health funding been a feasible solution? In EST, we need to build up a project with scientific funding. No other feasible alternatives for prototyping. Other funds are too small. So the question of really I would say a very concrete feasibility, and it relates to this sustainability issue as well. So if you, sorry, I'm just looking at the time. We are well, we are almost we should have ended the break in 2 minutes. As I know some people need to leave early, I will take the responsibility to maybe do only a 2-minute break so that people can tackle emergencies, and then in 2 to 3 minutes I will shift to the panel discussion. Thanks a lot already to all the speakers for these incredible top quality talks. And so in a couple of moments, we will be back for a discussion. Thank you very much, and see you in a very short time. So we'll now move for the next half an hour with a panel discussion around this very broad structuring question of how we can foster virtuous innovation in digital health in Europe. We saw earlier that this question has a lot of different aspects to it, legal and ethical, technical, and financial also. So a lot of different, and the question of collaboration between different stakeholders that are not in the same background, maybe not in the same countries. So that's a lot of different questions. So of course, this question would take, I would say, far more than half an hour to be tackled. So the idea is just to give hints and general tendencies, and from our panelists. So I will not, sorry about the slide mess up. I will now just have the previous speakers on board, with Pierre-Philippe, who agreed to join us. So I'll just introduce Pierre now. Pierre-Philippe is a psychiatrist by training and is head of a research unit in France named Sleep Attention and Neuropsychiatric Disorders. He possesses a large experience in clinical research and is currently coordinator of the clinical research at the University Hospital of Bordeaux. He is also the scientific director of a scientific specific research program dedicated to stimulation, virtual reality, and phenotyping of sleep and mental disorders. The marketing of the resulting conversational agents resulted in him creating a dedicated startup in May 2019, MyMed-A. He has conducted many national and international clinical trials and has been responsible for a NeuroNet program on sleepiness at the wheel while driving. His research fields include vulnerability criteria to sleep deprivation, conversational agents, digital and non-pharmacological therapies, mental health and challenges, and articulation between human attention and autonomous cars. So we have practitioners here, both in startup and medical fields, a European project manager and data expert, and an ethics law expert here to tackle very wide questions. So Pierre just mentioned that he has an emergency, which often happens to medical practitioners, right? So he will have to leave us before the end of the panel discussion, but hopefully the first questions will be able to join us for the first questions. Thanks for being there, Pierre. And also, Jeanne is also, as I said, you are perfectly allowed to jump in if you have comments to make from the last with all your background, of course. So the idea is to tackle hints, because of course each one of them can be discussed more than half an hour on its own. Those big questions, and we maybe what I suggest is that we take something like 7 minutes to tackle one of these, each of these discussions. And maybe the first one I can, as you will be very, you cannot attend all the panel, Pierre, maybe I can start with you. We talked a lot about this ethical use of patient data, but maybe the question I want to ask is maybe how can we improve and foster patient empowerment in data control? And maybe you have you can start the discussion with your thoughts on this.
Well, thanks for this very interesting presentation. I got 7 minutes to talk to you, so I'll try to give you my experience so it can give possibly complementarity elements in the discussion. We develop virtual agents, and the idea is to be able to develop autonomous tools that can be deployed through large platforms like Google Store or Apple Store. And we face a major problem, which is that as long as you stay in an hospital and you use digital tools in an hospital, you can have a high level of security, and you can go through RGPD controlled by hospital DPOs. But currently, the move for artificial intelligence, and you're gonna see it massively with the introduction of large language models, will go through natural digital equipments that the population possess, i.e. smartphones or computers. So here comes a very, very big challenge, which is that we know we lost the technological battle against the US and Korea, so no more French phones. We know we lost the economical battle about softwares, operating softwares for like Android or iOS. Now the challenge is, are we going to lose the battle of the data? I think that it's almost lost. So we can make like a diplomatic agreement with the companies, but here is the problem we face currently. If you want to deploy efficient and really innovative preventive tools and curative tools, you need to address issues like connected digital watch or smartphones. And technologically, all these tools basically capture your data, send them to the US, analyze them, and send them back to you. And we have been struggling with some recent, very well-funded programs like PRPR with a few million euros, and we were not able to find a single company that could guarantee us that the data would remain in Europe or in France. Okay, so in other words, either you lose the technology, that's a choice, one choice we made to follow psychiatric patient, where we're going to have a connected watch would transmit 0. So basically we need to send them by mail and get them back, which is like 19th century procedure. Or we were considering using Fitbit devices, for instance, or Apple device, and then the challenge is lost. So my recommendation would be to fight against the Patriot Act in the US, who allowed basically the US to capture all the data we are transiting through the US, and end up to an agreement where the devices used in continents should provide a security where the data remain in the continent, which is, I think, technologically feasible, but which is not maybe 100% the best solution for foreign companies. So my point is really, if we want to focus on one point, is to address that people will not use technologies who do not belong to their daily life. They want to use technology which already are in their daily life. And the success of ChatGPT is going to be related to the fact that it's completely included in your daily life. So here there's a big challenge for Europe, I think, to really address the issue of these tools. And I will finish my comment on that point. One very important point also to address is the limit between prevention and health empowerment and well-being versus medical care. And that limit is shifting more and more towards medical care because we are trying to develop prevention and behavioral interventions. And basically all the major companies like Samsung, Apple, want to sell healthcare and well-being. Why? Because they don't have to face medical rules, which are extremely constraining. But as physicians, what we want to show is that, for instance, improving sleep or improving physical activity has a direct impact on disease, like, for instance, depression. So here there's also a very big challenge. And you also have to understand that the rules applied currently on the RGPD for certification of medical device are basically killing the European market. I mean the minimal chance we had to catch up with the US is definitely dead. We are dead. In the next 5 years, there will be 0 major computerized medical device emerging from Europe. It's finished. The war is over. So we need to consider how many battles we lose every day and where we can stand. Probably with the data we can stand. On the technology, we're dead because we're too stupid. If you want to validate a medical device in the US, the FDA guarantee you that they have to answer in 180 days, period. Once you deposit your dossier, 180 days. In Europe, it's between 6 months and you don't know what, and there is no guarantee. So basically all the rich people go to validate their solution in the US. So we're gonna end up using French, German, and Swedish solutions certified in the US on the European territory, sending data to the US. It's beautiful. It's a model. It should be taught in the schools. That's it. I made my comment. I understand that you can see it as a bit pessimist, but the battle is not lost. But I think the technological concern is going to be major in the way we're going to address this issue, including RGPD. So I think that we have to face also big technological challenge and defend the idea of safety. But I think that the US also understand this issue, and we can have strong arguments against the GAFAM. But I think the healthcare system will not be able to function outside of the GAFAM. That's my vision.
So thank you, Pierre. Actually, you answered you had a transversal answer to this question, that we can foster virtuous innovation in digital health in Europe around the question that encompasses all those 4 questions, which is the question of sovereignty, basically, and so it's really interesting, because that's, as far as tech is concerned, it's a question that is I would say as old as the GAFAM companies for Europe, and that is particularly crucial in the field of digital health. I don't want if I don't know if other panelists want to react to this this question of sovereignty before moving to the next questions.
And Sebastian, just to complement my point,
Yes,
the whole field of AI tools, which will be developed in Europe and commercialized in Europe. For instance, all the information for the hospitals, I think they can be perfectly developed, controlled, and safely used in Europe by European companies because they rely on systems that belong to the infrastructures. The problem we face is that when we're going to go to the population level and we want to use smartphones, and that's where we lose the battle. So that's you see the limitation is here. So
yes.
It's not 100% the ship is sinking, but we have to be conscious that if we want to address the real model of precision medicine relying on digital tools, we will have to use smartphones.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. And of course, it's kind of a good transition to the question of patient empowerment, because in a way, if patients can feed their medical data willingly to their watch or to their smartphone, there's a question of what we call enlightenment, empowerment, so that they know what is at stakes. And that's one big point.
Well,
Yes.
currently it's not safe, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's enlightenment, because I think the counter argument with that is, do we actually know what is going on with the data? Or rather, that's the constant rhetoric at the back. And that's where I agree very much on the Patriot Act and fighting the battles where we need to fight the battles from a European perspective. Thank you.
Of course, and I remember the example you mentioned, Jan, about the anti-abortion laws in the US, and we see what the Patriot Act can do with health data, and of course it's quite terrifying, I should say. So I feel we have a very concrete example of what is at stakes here.
But if you look at the positive way, I don't see. Do you see my camera or not?
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
You see this little slot here where we need to plug, the cable to recharge the smartphones. Apple has been forced to homogenize that. Everybody thought it would be impossible. Then when Apple realized that they would lose share on the EU market, they say, fine, we're going to adapt. So I think for the data storage, it's about the same story. In the end, for sure, Apple or Samsung would prefer, or Android would prefer to have the European data if they need to be stored in Europe than not to have them. But we have to be extremely strict in the way we organize, and it's a lot of cost for them, because currently the data are sent directly to the headquarters. And that request from Europe would mean that they should have control locals servers that could store the data and use their technology locally, which is something which is not neutral in terms of funding for them.
Thanks. This is kind of reminding me of the fight that has already been going on around GDPR with those great companies, sure. And where we enforced a lot of things. I don't know how far, if we went as far as we could, we should, but in the end, we won some battles around that, and maybe a part of the answer is in the power that Europe has as a regulator, because that's well, at least the GDPR showed us that on this side some significant progress could be made to enforce things by foreign companies. But thank you.
I have to leave you. Thank you very much for interesting discussion. I'm going to jump back to my white coat job now, but keep in touch, and I hope we'll be able to move on this discussion in the future.
Thank you, Pierre,
Bye-bye.
for your insights. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So maybe so this question was kind of around is kind of around what we can do as Europeans to make sure health data is used in an ethical and controlled way. Actually, the question maybe is around the I think we tackled a part of the first question. Do you want to build in on this question of patients' empowerment? It was a lot focused. The previous discussions were a lot focused on the devices and the fact that the patient should know what is done with his data. Do you want to raise other aspects, or yes, Inigo?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think first of all, the first speaker will raise a very important point, is how are we going to deal with a world in which there will be different regulations, and we all know that this has been a big issue in the last years, and it's been really a nightmare for those projects who are trying to share data with American partners and so on, or Canadian. So that was really, an impressive issue, and I'm not so sure whether we will find a way to deal with that. However, I think that first of all, we need to realize that our own home is somehow quite not so well organized, and we get a lot of issues in the inside of the EU. Just to make some examples, it's so pretty difficult to combine databases from different countries at the EU level that, sometimes it's impossible to do that. It's just because not only due to technical reasons, that there might be some technical reasons, but there are also some legal reasons, especially because the GDPR allow different countries to introduce some limits and limitations on the use of health data according to Article 9.4, for example, and as a consequence, there are different legal systems in practice, especially for secondary use of data for research purposes. And the DPB has been promising us to have a kind of, a repo about that and showing us how to deal with this. To my knowledge, they have not yet produced something like that. Only in the case of COVID, they made some comments and remarks on how to do this, but we are just yet waiting for this. I guess that the new regulations, especially the special health data space, will be especially focusing how to build a new framework, because what we get right now, it's not so useful, to be sincere. And the main problem that I see is that first, it's good to say that we will be sharing lots of databases, but first of all, we need to build real nice databases, and we have standards and so on. And Olivier was commenting before that we're working on that, but to my knowledge, we are far from reaching some kind of agreements and concrete solutions on how to deal with that. Of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we are on that. And this is especially worrying if we consider that the European health data space, for example, is including some clauses that will allow patients on introduce some information from the devices in the records, in the electronic records. So we will have some mixes of different types of data. It will be quite hard to know what concrete databases are of high quality, which are not. So I'm not a technician, of course, but to my understanding, one thing that we really need is to have high quality databases. It's not enough that they are very big. We really need to have those ones being really useful for research or something like that. Because when we were talking about trust and how to ensure ethical use of patient data, first thing that we need to understand is that we should only use those data that we really need. That is very important. And second, we should use them in a really useful way, because otherwise, it's so disgusting for patients to know that the data are being used, but we are being to nowhere. And I think that this is something that we will have to care about. And if we manage to build something like that, yet there will be the main question on who is funding this, because it will cost really an impressive amount of money to try to build something like a kind of data lake at the EU level or anything like that. This is extremely costly. And we have also lots of issues related, for example, to the access to some data that have a lot of intellectual property on them, such as those coming from clinical trials. Because pharma companies, of course, will make an impressive pressure not to let no one get access to those data. And we will just have to fix how are we gonna, deal with that and introduce some compensations and so on. And I think this will last for very long. So I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think that we have a lot of obstacles in there. And it might happen that lots of EU citizens will become a little bit crazy about that, especially because in some other countries, they will go much faster. And of course, they will do that because they will not be so protective of the citizens. And I don't think that their option is better than us. In fact, I think that our option is much better than theirs. But we really need to find a way to make it practical. That's my opinion. I'm not shouting nothing else.
Thanks a lot for this insight, Inigo. We fall back to the question of building trust, which is really at the core of everything, and it builds on maybe several things that were already mentioned, but on the more I would say data side, the one of the bricks of trust would be, you at some point, Olivier, you mentioned certification and the need for some certification. It could be really it's not the solution to everything, but my idea, I don't know what you think of it, is that the good thing about certification is that it's something simple that you can trust without necessarily having to know what all which is behind as an end user. Like if you know as an end user, you don't know the GDPR, but you know that this is a GDPR compliant, you will maybe be more likely, trust it. And so those levels of certification for digital health would maybe be a greater set. So maybe I'll skip the second question unless you have a really you want to add to this, because we've already mentioned a lot this question. The question of how to improve shareability, interoperability. Yes, Susan, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on the innovation and regulation part, that the time for getting this kind of regulation is taking really, really long time in Europe. And as we said, in US, they are much faster. But that's an important thing to discuss, I think, that in Europe it takes at least for a CE mark, and that could be included also with this patient ethical use as well. But it takes between 1 year and 1.5, and that's really too long, I think, and that's something to be considered when developing new technologies as well. Just a comment.
Thanks, Suzanne, for reminding us that the one of the main problems is that the time scale of innovation and the time scale of regulation are not at all the same. And I remember what you mentioned, Jan, for new frameworks that might provide some hints to this problem. I don't know. Do you have some insights on this?
Mostly here is how have we set up the authorities that need to do this process? And unfortunately, one of the things is the recurrent under-resourcing of these authorities that does not help in the time process. And this we see in every authority that we have within the European levels also for this area. And I think that's one of the areas where we seem to also need to make the case that these authorities are very valuable and need the resources to be able to do their work, because when they're not doing their work, the whole of Europe is at a disadvantage and not being competitive enough.
Thanks for this very, very important statement about the need to, if I reword it, please correct me if I'm not saying it well, but to reword it, we have a lot of power. Europe has a lot of power in terms of regulation, but she does not necessarily have the means to enforce that power in an efficient way right now.
We have an under-resourcing in that aspect. And so we've made rules. The rule-making system is long, but once we make them, we don't even then facilitate the process that it gets quicker. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That gives me gives me an idea for the final discussions. The fourth question. Maybe we can jump into question 3 to see. You would say on the data oriented problems. We can have technical, we mentioned we can have technical, organizational, or legal barriers that can hinder the innovation process. And the research data, as we said, mentioned earlier, must be as close as necessary, in particular, sorry for the mishap, in particular in the health field, but also as open as possible, and in a context where we as Europeans can be greater than the sums of our parts and force things. How can we make it easier to improve shareability and interoperability? Olivier, you want to build on this?
Yeah, maybe, thanks. So we discussed the technical aspects for shareability, interoperability from a legal point of view. I think it's on its way. It should be fixed, if I can say, in the next couple of years, because there are lots of EU-funded projects on the subject. We discussed the EOSC as a data space. We discussed the health data space as well. There are many other data spaces that are being rolled out as we speak, from the public sector, but on the private sector as well, for the tourism, mobility, ecology, etc. So I think that we'll reach that technical interoperability for a legal point of view. But that will highlight the lack of harmonization in the legal frameworks that we have, because we will, from a technical standpoint, we will be able to aggregate data, share data, but we will not be allowed to do so by rules or laws or things like that. So the main area for improvement, in my opinion, it's the legal framework, the harmonization of legal rules, laws, and things like that.
Thank you, Olivier. Anyone wants to comment on
Yeah, very fastly, the European Health Data Space is meant to solve this. Main problem is that it works as two different regulations in practice, because one has to do with the clinical use of data, the other one has to do with the research use of data. I don't know how they are going to implement this in practice, but I think it will take years to make it work. I don't really know. I think that the main problem is that we are 27 countries, and this is really hard to deal with. We will see what happens with that, because, for example, with the directive about the directive about patients and the European, sorry about that, but that that allowed the interoperability and so on, that was not so successful for very long. So, Jean, maybe you know much more than me why this was.
No, I think it's. I was thinking exactly of the same example on the cross-border, the patient right in a cross-border context, and I think because there are things that can be done at a high level of regulation, but a lot of the rules that we need is that they actually speak with the technical part. And that the legislator at the European Parliament, at the European Commission level is way too high to do. So we need to move more into principles, but allow much more frameworks of where rules can be set up easier, almost in a contractual format, but that allow the development and trial and error of how certain data spaces can develop. I think we're now learning quite a lot, because there are data spaces for research, for energy data, for different uses, and from there, I think it should be easier to have sub rules. So I'm trying to differentiate from rules that come from the EU as a whole, and more of creation of the rules that will regulate that particular data space. And we can, I think, do a little bit more with certification and more self-regulation, if you would like to call it this way.
Thanks a lot for this very, very interesting exchange. We are running kind of short of time now. So what I'm just suggesting is to finish with the fourth question and I ask you to be very, I would say, partial in your answer, to give your individual idea of what, to you as panelists, as experts in your domain, what do you think would be the next step, and what could we do in this area of, I would say, ethical, virtuous, digital health in Europe, capable of doing now, that can have a great impact? The most important thing and next step to you, it's really, well, the idea is really to have a partial answer. There is no right or wrong answer, but to have your point of view on this question. Necessarily very partial.
If I may start, just to set it going, my partial goal is to help the legislator fight the battles that need to be fought, as we said with Flip, making those clear and making the case for those battles, like with the Patriot Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanne.
And I agree. I think the regulation and set the regulation scene is really important, and to do that fast and efficient, and to have all the resources that needed.
Well, in my opinion, one of the best things that we could do is to start implementing artificial intelligence tools in practice with some boxes and so on in different sectors, just to let people understand how this could improve the situation. Because I think that if most of the citizens understand that technology might help us live better, then there will be much more, pressure on the regulators to, speed up the processes. Because otherwise we are sometimes talking about from a theoretical point of view, but there are no, evident results on the table, and this is not so helpful.
Yeah, I think we all agree that the area for improvement is about the regulations and harmonization inside Europe, but potentially from a global point of view as well. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. I asked you your opinion, and we just discussed we just discovered independently that everyone thinks the next big step is this one around regulation. So that could not be a better end to this panel discussion. Before turning the microphone to Margareta for wrap up, I really want to thank you for the quality and diversity of the discussions and points of view on this very complex questions. I hope you enjoyed being there as much as I did. And then I'll just leave the floor to Margareta for the conclusion.
Thank you very much, and also thank you very much for all people attending this webinar and you who are present in the panel. The time is running up, but there are, well, a rather positive view of what is needed, but also that it's a time-consuming thing to actually achieve. For us who are working in the ENLIGHT Alliance, we have a lot of students coming up. That's one of our main tasks, to empower students for the future and also put pressure in those areas where we need more of interaction and development of regulation and so on. Hopefully, since you are very, very well, there are no disagreement in this from this panel, which is, of course, one good thing. Hopefully, we can do something in that direction and also have some input in how to actually empower our students. I think it's also the different perspectives in this discussion has been very valuable, because if you are, for instance, a small startup or a researcher with a PhD student who wish to start a company, it also shows how important a well-organized support is, because otherwise this will only be painstaking work and failure somewhere around the corner. It's complicated, it's time-consuming, you have to convince investors and so on, and then you need really good support for that, and that is also important for us then working with this ENLIGHT platform in order to empower the people working in our universities, but also in the innovation districts around. Time is, there's 1 minute left. I would really again like to express my sincere thanks to you who really gave your expertise to us in this. And hopefully there will be some kind of, there will be a white paper, for instance, from this ENLIGHT community that we will pass upwards in the society. And I will also encourage you, even though people are busy, many people who were interested couldn't attend this webinar, but it will be on the ENLIGHT YouTube channel. And then it's possible for people who would like to look at it again or didn't have the opportunity to be here to take part in all these very good speeches. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Margareta. I'm just taking a few seconds to thank again all the speakers for this incredibly lively, expert and diverse talk about this multifactorial question of digital health. I really well, thanks a lot. It was really a pleasure to have you on board. And to the audience, as Margareta said, we will update the video, the recording in our YouTube channel. So stay tuned. Thanks a lot. And as I'm French, I will tell you all bon appétit.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.